Hello and welcome to Wennell's Guide to doing ROS in Black Temple as a hunter. So phase 1, pretty easy. Just kite him around, use Raptor Strike, Chimera Shot on cooldown. You can't really heal in this phase, so don't worry too much about that. Also, your pet is unable to tank in this phase, so don't worry about that. You just have to kite him around, DPS him as best you can. You should be able to fairly easily kill him before he kills you. And don't worry if you do get low, you'll be able to quickly gain your HP back during the transition. The main thing is during phase 2, he has a couple abilities you gotta look out for. One is Spirit Shock, and whenever he casts Spirit Shock, he will cast it on a player. Then he will find the next player or pet or whatever, cast it on them. Then he will go back to the original player, cast it on them, and he just keeps alternating casting on who he's casting it on, and it'll daze that person or whatever for 6 seconds. And so you just have to. The trick is to basically make it so that he is traveling during those for like 5 or 6 seconds, and then in order to cast it. Otherwise, obviously, you'll die pretty quickly because it'll just keep alternating and you'll both be dazed. Um, so you can see we're about to transition. Basically, for the transition, you just want to quickly kill all your little mobs, make them explode next to you, and they'll heal you to full. So basically, in order to make the whole phase 2 work, you can see where I put my pet. You just put your pet on passive, make it go to behind that one pillar up in the front, as far back in the corner as you can, and you just keep your pet there. Once he's there, you just DPS the rest of these little lads quickly, put a snake trap down, and then you want to MD the boss onto your pet. Once the boss reaches your pet, you can tell your pet to attack for a few seconds. So you go. You want to silently shot the first Spirit Shock, and then from there you want to deterrence, disengage, and head to the pillar in the back of the room, back behind that pillar. And from there you just want to spam passive on your pet, make sure your pet stays on passive so he doesn't follow the boss. And you're just going to keep your pet on passive at that point. Now the entire way this works is your pet's going to be behind that one pillar up in the front. You're going to be behind the one pillar in the back. And like I said before, whenever you cast Spirit Shock, it'll daze you for like 5 seconds. So it dazes me, and whenever I'm dazed, he'll go attack my pet, and then once my pet gets dazed, he'll go back to attack me. So by both of us being out of line of sight of each other, he's having to travel to get to each other, to get to me and my pet. And the more he has to travel, obviously the better, because that means we're able to get a little bit more healing from that little buff that we have, and then it means that neither of us are like, by the time he heads back to me, I'll be undazed again, so I'll have a little bit of time to do bandages or whatever. So basically during this phase, what you're going to want to do, there's a few things you got to look out for. He casts Rune Shield on himself. Whenever he does that, you got to make sure you trank that off of him. You want to stay back here as much as possible, line of sighting him as much as possible. You can pop out occasionally to cast a trank on him, but be very careful about it. Whenever he comes back to you after you get the shield off of him, make sure you Chimera Shot him. Chimera Shots and Trank are the only two abilities you're going to be using. You can use a Snake Trap, but it's really not going to do much. It can help a tiny bit though, but any of your main abilities you use, he does. Anytime you deal damage to him, you get damage dealt to you. So Trank is really the only damaging ability you want to use for that reason, because when you deal damage to him, it'll heal you, and even though you're taking damage, it'll heal you. So that's really the only ability you're able to use on him. Um, if you'll notice, me and my pet get healed for a lot more than normal. It's because we get a buff put on ourselves, which increases healing by 100%. That's the reason our healing's so much higher. Um, but it's only during this phase. So basically, you just want to keep staying behind the pillar. Anytime he casts Rune Shield, trank it off, because if the Rune Shield is up, he will cast Spare Shock very quickly and rapidly. If you feign death, you'll want to. He'll basically go to your pet and just chain cast Spear Shock on your pet until you go and deal damage or whatever to him, get aggro. So if you do feign death, make sure you get aggro of some form quickly again. Don't let it just sit on your pet or your pet's going to die. Um, Use deterrence during this. You can see I'm using it right now. Um, if you're able to use deterrence, if as you notice, like right there, he went back to my pet even though he hadn't gotten a Spirit Shock to actually be on me, and that's because my pet had higher aggro. So he'll go to whoever has a higher aggro if neither of you are dazed. Um, so that's another thing to look out for. And basically, if you're able to mitigate damage that he's dealing to you until your pet becomes undazed, he'll go back to your pet and then you won't even be dazed. Which, that's always nice, but it's kind of hard to do. So just keep up snake traps, keep doing tranking, keep Chimera shotting to self heal. Um, you can see that that was another thing. Dredden, you got to make sure he does not cast Dredden on you. And if he does cast it on you, absolutely make sure there's no Rune Shield on him, and make sure that he's only you don't shoot him at all because you'll just take a ton of damage. So because Dredden will allow him to deal a ton of damage to you, a lot more than normal. So that's another thing to look out for. Um, and basically, whenever you start getting low, maybe 40, 30%, try to use a band aid on yourself. If you get really low, use a health pot, but you'll only be able to do that once. I think I'm actually going to be using that here. I'm like, no. But that's pretty much the whole thing. Is I mean, it's really challenging. It's complicated. And I still don't fully get it, but it's basically you're playing ping pong with a boss, and he's going to cast Spirit Shock on you, daze you, and then he's going to cast Spirit Shock on your, go to your pet, cast Spirit Shock on your pet, daze your pet, and he'll just keep going back and forth doing that. So as long as you have bandages and are bandaging at the appropriate time, um, it, it's kind of hard to bandage at the appropriate time. Like right now, I'm like, shit, I got a bandage. But as long as you're able to get those bandages off, then you should be good. Also, your pet. Another reason I choose a cat is because your pet has lick your wounds talent or whatever, which when your pet gets really low in health, while he's attacking you, you can use that ability and your pet will go back to full HP. It's like a 2-minute cooldown. So you can see I'm about to use that on my pet. But that's pretty much all there is to this phase. I mean, you can see I'm about to kill him. Don't get cocky and don't get. Oh, you see, I went all the way down to 10%. I was like, oh my god. So just don't get cocky. Be very, very, very careful. Don't try and start blowing your cooldowns. Just keep doing what you were doing. You can feign death, but be careful about feigning death. Yeah, you see, I had to feign death there, and bandage myself. I was like, no. But as long as you're cool, careful, and you properly manage doing the rune, taking care of the rune shields, using your Chimera shot properly, being careful of that dread, and if it is cast on you, you should be able to eventually get through this phase. And you see, I got through the phase. I was like, oh my god. Occasionally, you can be very unlucky, and your pet will actually go out from behind the pillar when he gets dazed. And if that happens, you're pretty much screwed, because at that point, the boss will be able to hit the have like line of sight of you and your pet pretty easily. Um, and so you just have to reset the encounter at that point. But otherwise, just keep your pet on passive after that initial like 10-15 seconds of phase 2. And then from there, you can actually get your tanking pet out at this point and start DPSing the boss, tanking the boss, and DPSing him. He really doesn't do much damage during this phase, just normal tank and spank. So pretty much it's the second phase, and if you can manage to properly handle the trank shots, Chimera shots, bandages, silencing shots, deterrences, all that stuff, make sure you're able to stay out of line of sight. I probably could have done a better job staying out of line of sight, but if you can properly do all that, you will be very golden, and you will kill an extremely difficult boss, and everyone will congratulate you and think you're the best hunter in the world. So, alright, so thanks for watching, and I hope this guide was at least a semblance of help. I might make another one later once I understand the fight better, maybe explain it better. But hopefully this helps you for now getting through the encounter.